Welcome to Conversations with Zi and Vindesh, a weekly discussion that explores common life challenges and offers practical solutions. Learn more at dharmamedia.com. That's DHARMA media.com.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Z, always good to see you. We're talking today about opinions. Everyone's got an opinion. You know what they say about opinions? They're just like something else. Everyone's got one. And what's interesting when we're having these discussions about life and society and everything going on in the world, most of the time we don't worry too much about people's opinions. So I was thinking about this. Let's say that you like a certain flavor of ice cream. You like strawberry. Maybe I don't like strawberry. I don't spend all my time trying to tell you, you got to like strawberry ice cream, or explain all the ways that you're wrong and why vanilla or chocolate is worse than strawberry and how strawberry is the most delicious flavor. That would be kind of a crazy conversation. So we don't do that. But at the same time, if you look at what's happening in the world, we have all these events, whether it's Trump versus Biden, whether it's the trial and whether Trump has been unfairly prosecuted, whether it's what's happening in Israel and Gaza, and everyone's got an opinion. So people are on different sides of these issues. And regardless of the opinion and the fact that we can see the same, or we might be able to agree on what is happening. Now, even that at times is challenging. Sometimes there are disagreements as to what's happening. But let's say we can agree on what's happening. People are going to interpret that differently. Or even if they've got the same interpretation, their judgment of whether this is right or wrong, their assessment of the situation is going to be different. And that's called an opinion. So I might have one opinion, you might have another opinion. Maybe I've grown up in a certain way with a certain set of values or a certain set of life experiences that are different than yours. So your assessment, your view of that is different. And that should be cool. I mean, that's the nature of life. We've all got different perspectives, a different view on things. And yeah, we do need some common ground. It would be nice to agree on facts. But if we can agree on the facts, why can't we be comfortable with people having different opinions? So when you look at what's happening right now, and I've seen this when I've engaged in discussions around social issues or politics, we're in a world right now, Z, where this whole idea of having different opinions is breaking down. It's almost like if your opinion isn't the same as mine, you are wrong. And not only are you wrong, I'm going to go out of my way to show you why you are wrong. And I am not going to stop until I can force you to accept my point of view. So you have to see you have to see the world the same way that I see it. You have to come to the same conclusion about it. And if you don't, we're going to keep this going. And we're going to keep on escalating the discussion until I pull you into my corner. And it's just weird. It is a weird thing. It is a need to force your point of view on someone else. And when I think about this, because if we go back to that ice cream example, or any other sort of opinion, an opinion about a movie, about a TV show, about the type of partner that you find attractive, whether you want to go for wealth or you want to go for looks when you're finding a mate, or you want to find something else, everyone's got a different opinion, and that should be okay. But on these issues and in this environment, suddenly it has become wrong to have a different opinion than the person you are talking to. And again, not only is it wrong to have a different opinion, this puts us into tribes, it forces people apart, it destroys relationships, and in some cases, people are losing their jobs, they're losing their livelihoods. I was having this discussion with someone at dinner. So we've seen what's happened with Israel and Gaza and all the censorship there. This person was making the same point about Trump. He actually wasn't a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter, but he just thought it was interesting because he's looked at Silicon Valley, and in certain Silicon Valley companies, you can't be a Trump supporter. So if you come out and talk about how much you like Trump, you might lose your job and you might not be able to have a career in that industry, which I thought was interesting. I mean, same phenomenon, different topic. So this is pretty critical because as we're navigating this landscape, if we just want to get along with people, if we want to be able to share ideas and not necessarily convince someone that they're wrong or have someone change our mind, but being able to have these discussions about the world is useful. It just gives us more information. It gives us different perspectives. Either it refines our thinking, maybe it shifts us in a different direction. We don't have to completely change who we are and what we believe, but having that information and that perspective is useful. So how do we get to that point? I mean, how do we get from a place where you're either with me or against me? If you're not with me, I'm going to beat you down, to a place where we can respect the fact that there are certain things we might just not agree on, and that is okay. And there's certain things which might not be universally right or wrong. I mean, we might have our own standards, but we can't necessarily impose those standards on the rest of the world. So talk to us a little bit about that, Z. How do we get to this point, and how do you see us getting out of this? I mean, given this world that we're in, how should we think about different opinions and having those types of discussions?
Yeah, Rodney, you threw a lot at me, and we've been talking about this a little bit offline, and there's a few areas that come to mind. When you think about the idea of an opinion is not necessarily a fact, and the fact is not necessarily the whole story based on how it's presented. So I always, again, like to look at weights and measures. I was talking to a doctor the other day, OBGYN guy, and in a very clinical way, this guy had been in a medical practice for over 40 years. He just recently retired, been delivering babies for 45 years. And he was just talking about gender and how there are different types of women's hips, which I had never heard of. In terms, he had a categorization of hips. He had like a more androgynous hip that exteriorly looks kind of like a male hip. It's not as wide, but it still has the way that the woman can carry a baby, where the cervix opens up and so forth. And he was just talking about that and how when he hears arguments about the sexes, he has nothing to say. He said, because there is nothing to say. There are women and there are men. And he says he's in the business of delivering babies, bringing forth humanity. And that's it. And once you start adding opinions, the facts are long disappear. So oftentimes the more opinionated you are, the less facts you have associated with that. And so that was a powerful statement that he had made. And because when you're working in these modern environments, you have to be very aware of how you speak about certain things because of how people will react to what you say. And as you said, we're connected globally by the World Wide Web, by our social media presence. So people can kind of follow you around and offer opinions about you under the cover of anonymity, and you could possibly it can affect your career in an adverse way. It can, they do this preemptive strike against anything that would be considered outside of the comfort zone or the offense matrix of the day. And so getting back to when we have these opinions, we want to benefit ourselves by thinking about, where do opinions come from? Well, your opinions start first with your upbringing, how you're raised, how you have framed the world. You know, like when you travel in India, anybody who's gone to India, almost every shoe shine boy or rickshaw driver will tell you the philosophy of the world, how the world works. Even though they've never left that area, that bog they live in, they will tell you how the world works. They have an opinion about the whole world, but what they're really talking about is their reality. And so they're no different than the rest of us. As you say, this idea that I have an opinion. And if we can acknowledge that in ourselves, we tend to be able to appreciate other people more. There tends to be a better stream of harmony. But again, harmony requires a certain level of social intelligence for one to strive for harmony. It's easier and it's a lower level of intelligence. We strive for disharmony, dominance, control, forcing people to have the same opinions, the same views, to see the same thing the same way. And there's some sort of kind of maybe a comfort, I don't know, that's derived from that. In the case of a lot of people I know, they're not comfortable with this idea that everybody's in lockstep, right? And it's not to be a rebel for the sake of rebelling, but to have that self-ownership, that self-realization. As I teach my students, before you can look at someone else, before you can do a medical assessment of someone else, know who you are looking at them. Know what your opinions, your views, your values are when you look at a person. Be able to admit that, to be honest with yourselves in order to give that client the best service possible. Because these things play out this way. As I told you, I went to a dermatologist once about something, and he just looked at me and said, "You're dirty," because he felt that all black people were dirty and primitive. So he just said, "You're dirty and you should wash more." Well, I'm cleaner than you, dude. I'm a clean freak when it comes to my hygiene in my body, my fitness, and all that kind of stuff. But I wasn't upset. I didn't get upset like, "Oh, you should have been outraged. You should have filed a complaint." That wouldn't have changed him other than his behavior towards other clients like me. He would have adjusted his behavior to not be chastised. He would have adjusted his behavior to just get by the day. But he would not have adjusted his biases in such a way that he would have been able to provide better health care, right? So this idea that you're going to force people by axe hanging over their head to fall into line, they still don't share that with you. They're still not close to you. They just made you comfortable with your shortcomings. And so when we think about ourselves, let us all be honest with yourself. I came to these views because of such and such. Here's how I was raised. Here's my religion. Here's my belief. So if you come to me with a different idea, a different notion, I may not be receptive to that because it's not what I am familiar with, no matter what the scale or the ruler says, right? And it goes into the way we kind of see the world too. Like, I grew up in a culture where people didn't relate more and big to be advantageous. And I remember being in the military and guys would talk about people. There was this really big guy and he came up to me and we were scared. And then I would say, "Well, why were you scared?" They said, "Well, he was really big." I said, "Okay, but why were you scared?" "But he was really big." "Well, why were you scared?" So does big automatically mean scary? For some people in their culture, that means girth, volume, whatever is more, greater than. Well, I come from a culture that down the street from us were Twa people. They're pygmies who are little bitty people who basically run under sprinting elephants, slice their bellies open, climb up in the elephants. That's how they hunt elephants. And these are little people that never grow much bigger than an average child. But they have no problem hunting a running elephant. We're scared of those people. So if you came and tell me, "Hey, there's this little quick person," I'm going, "Oh, shit. That's horrifying. He's little and quick. Oh, my God. Now we have to worry," right? So the way we form our view of the world, right? It's kind of like you listen to the case of this serial killer called Ted Bundy, right? Everybody said the same thing. He was so handsome and well-dressed. He spoke so articulately. He was a member of the Republican National Committee. How could he even be a killer? So much to the point that, he escaped from jail a number of times because the jailers themselves saw him as such an ideal person that they didn't guard him. One of the most prolific serial killers in history. They're still finding dead bodies from Ted Bundy, even after he's been executed. But if you look at it, because he fit into our common opinion of a good guy, even faced with the weights and measures of his activity and his atrocious behavior towards people, the murder and the tortures he did to women, even though he did it, they say, "Oh, he couldn't have done it. Look how handsome he is. He's a Republican." That was Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy. So we think about, how do we come to our views of the world? How do we come to our opinions of the world? And once we accept it, acknowledge it, and not in a way of shaming ourselves or beating yourself down, you can just say, "Hey, like Popeye says, I am what I am, and that's all that I am. But now that I'm going into the theater of the humans, I can make that little adjustment," right? It's like these discussions we have on society. I saw a thing where I guess some group was giving black women money to help them with their businesses, and some white group took them to court and said that was racial discrimination, and they won't allow this group to continue on giving money to one of the most marginalized groups on planet Earth, because they said it would hurt this other group that isn't being hurt by any of this. And people say, well, it's just about being fair. No, it's not. It's about your opinion. Someone sat there and looked at that and said, I don't feel that this class of people should move up their class. And we see it everywhere. I'm just using that as a case. You know, in India, one of the biggest hurdles against when Ambedkar wanted to end the caste system in India, he came up with this huge plan, and he wrote a wonderful article about it, or book about it, known as The Annihilation of Caste. It's one of the best reads you'll ever have. It just is the blueprint for social harmony. The annihilation of caste. So you would think right away, well, who would be against the annihilation of caste? Just offhand, Kenan, who would be against the annihilation of caste? What group within a caste system would be against the annihilation of caste? Would it be the Brahmins at the top?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, you would think, okay, the Brahmins don't want this. No, it was actually the low caste because there was a caste under them. So under the untouchables were the unapproachable and the unseeables. So they wanted to maintain their status above that caste. So they said, no, let's keep the caste system intact. This is how crazy we are as a collective people, and why it's so valuable to seek self-realization. If you could just sit and see yourself stewing in your own garbage, coming up with these opinions and views, and then wanting the world to conform to those, wanting the world to be compressed into your bubble of reality. We see it played out in the Middle East. I get it. You can almost to the letter ask a person how they title themselves. What is your, how do you identify yourself? And you can tell what side of an issue they fall on, even if that side is genocidal, homicidal, sociopath, whatever it is. You will find a way to be on the side of tyranny if that tyrant wears the same T-shirt, representing the same team as you. It's kind of like when you watch sports play. There used to be, in the football thing, I'm not a big sports fan, but I do remember when the Oakland Raiders were known for playing dirty, right? Because I knew some Oakland Raiders. So these guys would play football, and they would tape their hands up, and they would have a metal rod taped to their fist, the back of their hand. Or they would have some sort of spiky device so they could hurt the opponent, right? And every now and then one of them would get busted or something. Okay, you put some sort of metal rod in your padding. You had a piece of jagged wire or jagged metal taped to your shoe so you could spike a guy. And this was outrageous. But you know who it wasn't outrageous to? Was Raider fans. That was part of the allure of the team. That was part of the thing. If you see somebody with the skull and crossbone and the Raider, you know they were into dirty fighting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, you see the same thing now because, again, it's a different perspective. You've got one perspective on certain conflicts, which is, oh, this is horrible, all these people were killed. And you got the other side, which is saying, no, we came and we conquered. That's what we do. That's how we roll. We come in and we take over, and there's nothing wrong with it. And you can see both sides. I mean, it's a different perspective, but you got to recognize that they're coming at it from a different standpoint. And you can also choose who you want to align with. I mean, that's the other thing. You know, it's what's weird to me, Z, isn't so much that there are the different perspectives, but maybe it's the failure to acknowledge that there's another reality, that you're talking up your own book. You know, you're talking up what's in your own self-interest, or as you're saying, what fits with your life experience. And nothing wrong with that. That's cool. But at least acknowledge that that's what you're doing. I mean, it's kind of like the discussions that we have in the United States about human rights, which to me are insane because there's no universal standard. I mean, the only standard is what we do is right, and what anyone else does that hurts us is wrong. And if someone else is attacking us or they're going against our interests, then they're rapists, they're terrorists, they're baby killers. But if we do the same thing, we're fighting for freedom and democracy, which to me is, every time I hear this, it's so ridiculous. But maybe it's repeated often enough. like it's seeped into everyone's subconscious that you don't.
But look, Roddy, I get so worked up when you say that because the reason you could hear it is because you're working on yourself. People that aren't working on themselves can't hear that. Oh, this is a great democracy. For who? I saw a guy the other day, and a lot of this stuff is just provocative. So when you carry your religious book or your flags or whatever, you're actually trying to be provocative. It's not even devotional anymore. It's not intimate. It's like, let me see what bear I can poke. And so this guy was walking around was saying, a shirt that said, I love Western civilization. So that's another way of saying I'm a white supremacist. And then he would attract other kind of people with this kind of white supremacy attitude. And I say that because I understand, I can read people pretty well. I'm into military things and all that kind of stuff. I know what group is what group and the whole idea of taking over the government and all these people into that kind of stuff. And the gun culture, I get that. I get that. So that's just like wearing the police blue flags, Blue Lives Matter, as a response to Black Lives Matter. I get the way that everybody is signaling everything, and for whatever reason, they want either to repel or attract people of their ilk. And what you think about is when that talk show guy, Bill Maher, was talking about how great Western civilization is. And all I would say to him is, who is it great for? And they talk about, well, this is the best place for women's rights, human rights. I haven't experienced that. He's had a different experience than me. So I agree with his position. For him, it's great. For me, excuse me, for me, it's not.
Yeah, but let's get into this for a second, because you made this one comment, which I thought was interesting, that if you're wearing a shirt that says, I love Western civilization, it puts you in the white supremacist bucket. What's wrong with saying that you love Western civilization? I mean, why can't you love it and not be a white supremacist?
He's signaling. He knows he's signaling. The guy had the mannerisms of signaling. You're announcing something, you're wearing a big postcard, so you're waving a Confederate flag or whatever, or you go to text and you say, I'll give up my gun over my cold, dead hands. You're letting me know what your opinions are. And there's a reason that you're flashing that opinion. Oftentimes it is to be provocative.
Yeah. What about something like flying the American flag? Because now people are saying just flying the flag is an act of hatred and insensitivity. And other people are saying, you know what, this is just, I can't be patriotic anymore? I mean, I can't feel good about my country.
You can do whatever you want to do, but just go with the eyes open. What is patriotism? Is patriotism swinging a flag? Is it being a good neighbor? Is it guarding the border from the horrible immigrants from the shitbag countries coming? What does it mean to be a patriot? So it's easy to pick up these symbols of your opinions, or it's just like trolling on the internet. You rarely ever will be held accountable for what you say in your comments. So as you see, most of the internet comments are based on very hateful things. So these people have opinions they often wouldn't stand by if they were face to face with another. So that's what I mean. Opinions are that kind of flagrant thing you can do to voice your inner self, right? But that inner self is actually formed and shaped by other people, right? How about I'm for human civilization? So if I wore a shirt that says I'm for Western civilization is the best, what if I said human civilization is best? What if I said that? What if
hippie
being a human? Right.
Yeah.
Can I be a hippie?
Yeah.
Because I'm not excluding anybody.
Right.
So that's right. That's a good point. So I'm being exclusive when I say Western, but I'm being a hippie when I include every human being.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you're also being a communist.
There you go. You see what I'm saying? So we know what that means. We don't have to play with it. But remember, these opinions and these definitions of opinions are coming from our background like this, and they're not based on anything real. They're not based on real weights and measures. This whole thing in the Middle East has played, all these student protests have played out before. We talked about that before. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and every protest, as through history, has told us that the kids were right. Everyone. They called civil rights protesters, people who wanted basic human consideration, as being outside agitators, communists. The U.S. even had something called the House Un-American Committee. The House pointing out who was un-American, going way back to the days of Garvey. Now, 50 years later, freedom of information, you can look at all this stuff 60 years later, and you see the energy and effort that went into it by the government to crush, crucify, demean anybody involved in what? Basic human rights. Then we're repeating it again because all those so-called civil rights and affirmative action were born of people being denied the right to exist as a human being without the government infringing on them, killing them, whatever, right? People say, oh, that's all over. Well, all of a sudden, you had a generation of people who sacrificed their lives, tortured, murdered, blah, 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 for these things. Now, people sitting at a computer can say, I hate affirmative action. It's racist against me. It's racist against my group. It's not. But that person that's doing that keyboard thing is making, that's the sacrifice they're making. Maybe they get a little carpal tunnel, but nobody's going to kill them for that. So everything that's being taken away from certain groups of people was earned by bloodshed and the loss of flesh and life. It's being taken away with no more than a swipe of the keyboard. And so these opinions that people say that I'm being negatively affected by a lower class of people getting social equity. This is insane, as we know, but I also appreciate where these people are coming from. They've been told that the social status, if anything changes social ranking, you will lose. Same way that the untouchables didn't want the unseeables and the unapproachables to now be equal partners in society. Because in their mind, they needed to have some commonly accepted index of social status.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about the Z is I'm thinking about all the infrastructure and the institutions and the NGOs that are in place to shape our thinking. Because a lot of the narratives we hear and the discussions we hear, they go back 40 years, and they come out of plans that these think tanks have to advance their own agenda. And then it just goes on in the background, and it's 40 years of programming that we're fighting against. So, for example, you take something in common discussion, and you look at terms like welfare queens, or you look at just the concept of taxation and how you're constantly being squeezed. Or you've got this conception that you've got all of these freeloaders, and you got these immigrants who are coming in who are freeloaders, or you got people at the bottom of the chain. You've got all these other countries that the U.S. is providing aid to, and we're being exploited by these countries. And if you actually look at the reality, we basically run the world for the benefit of the United States. And these countries are in a state of perpetual distress. The immigrants are a source of cheap labor. We get products produced at a fraction of the cost that we can produce them over here. So actually, the benefit and the cost is flowing in the opposite direction. The benefit is flowing at the top of the chain, and the costs are being spread out across this mass of humanity. But if you look at what the common discussions are, it's all about, oh, you've just got all these freeloaders who are lazy, and because they're not making enough money to survive, it means that they're not working hard enough, and they're taking advantage of the system. They're taking advantage of the rest of us, all us hardworking people who are sitting in our offices and collecting paychecks. We're being taken advantage of by people who are just struggling to get by and put food on the table. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but people don't question that because how long has that narrative been in place? I mean, how long has it been cultivated for? How much money is behind it? So I feel like that's also something important that we have to talk about. You know, it's not just our life experience per se, but there are interests and there are institutions who are actively trying to shape our opinions. And actually, I would go beyond that. It's not just shaping our opinions. it's convincing us that these aren't opinions, that there is no alternative. So it's trying to control us in a way where our opinions become a reality. And once a reality, we stop questioning them. And if anyone tries to question that reality, that's when we become threatened, because it's kind of like, okay, if it's not that, I don't know what reality is. I feel very unsettled. I feel afraid. So I'm going to hunker down. I'm going to double down on this position. So Zi, talk a little bit about that dynamic.
Well, as we talk about it, it sounds very simplistic, right? It's very point to point, that there are these tremendous amount of resources put into creating mass opinion, mass ideology, mass view. And if you go back and look in some of the archives of like J. Edgar Hoover, these agitation propaganda campaigns, you look at any war, even in your lifetime, there's this diabolical enemy, and they keep pulling out the same script. He's eating children and denying women their rights. So we're going to go blow up the country, kill all the women and children to give them rights and bring them democracy. And it just seems to be the commercial just seems to be in an endless loop. For those of us who are opting out, we catch ourselves and we listen. And even as you're talking, there will be many people, if they were to hear you say, oh, if you hate this country, then get out. That's not even what we're talking about. I think if you love this country, you would want it to be the best place. And in order for it to be a better place, an ideal place for all these people from all over the place who come here for property rights or to come here to make a living without a bunch of government intervention, that's what people come here for. They want the property rights. They want ability to work and keep their money. Well, we're losing that by thinking that there's others that are undermining you. You're actually losing the very thing that you value. But you think that this person is anti-patriot, anti-you. But if you think about some of the better ideas was to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there are forces that are messing with you, forces that are manipulating. So you don't even know what happiness is. You're driving around in your 4x4 dually truck, living in a decent home, working at a decent wage, and you're mad at somebody. You weigh 300 pounds, your wife weighs 400, you have more than enough of everything, and you think that these others are getting your stuff. Think about it. Your life is fine. Other people want their life to be fine. They're not infringing upon that. They're not at all. I talked to a guy, one of my clients, he owns a number of restaurants, and he told me that he's getting into this pop-up restaurant thing, right? He's doing pop-ups now. I said, well, what about that? So he said, I'm shutting them all down. We can't find, they just raise the minimum wage to $20. I can't afford $20 minimum wage. And I said, well, just hire some people from Mexico that everybody else does. They work hard. He said, no, the ones who've been in America too long, they're Americans now. So they want $50 an hour, or they won't work. So we're looking for the people that are just climbing over the border. And again, it is a mutually beneficial thing. People say, oh, that's exploitive. Well, on the other hand, it's impossible to function with government sanctions. His business cannot function with government sanctions. That's the infringement on his right to live his life without the government intervening. And I think that's where I agree with a lot of some of the things that the classical conservatives, I say classical conservatives, not these nutcase people now, but these people who just really, how about leave us alone? But in order for you not to leave people alone, you have to be indoctrinated with some kind of bizarre opinion that if you do well, it hurts me. If you do well, it hurts me.
What the hell was that?
That was my wife's ringtone. Okay, so you start to see that we're all being bamboozled, and then you share your opinions about society as a whole. You have the race narrative, you have the class narrative, that some way, somehow, that it is a bad thing if everybody is okay, right? How about you just leave people alone? As long as they're not infringing on you and your space. And you see the phenomena affecting society everywhere. I was in the mall the other day, And these kids were stealing yogurt from the yogurt guy. You know how you have these yogurt stands, and you go get your yogurt, and you go take it and weigh it, see how much the yogurt weighs, and you buy it. There's a real nice guy. So some weird kids came by, and you could feel these kids seemed feral. They were zombified. They were amoral. They had nothing in them, and they didn't make eye contact, and they didn't have space. So they had some sort of whatever, some kind of autism, but it was masses of them. That's what we've done with our bad opinions. So is that something to be proud of? Is that something to wave a flag of? Unless you feel yourself separate from them. And that's another thing, otherism. So when I, myself, immigrant person, sees a settler or a colonist going to a place where they are not indigenously from, killing the locals, and then saying through divine providence we should be here, I'm not going to side with that. It's really that simple. I do not feel adjacent to colonization. Just like we have the term now we call white adjacent for model minorities. We see the model minority feels they're safe as long as they are nearer to white and further from black based on the binary scale of class and race in America, right?
Yeah, so you know what's interesting? Now you can't even have those discussions. I don't know if you saw what happened in the UK, but there was some activist who was at a protest and was holding up a sign. So Rishi Sunak is the prime minister of the UK, and there's this other chick, Suella Braverman, and they're both South Asian. And so this woman was holding up a sign with their pictures and a coconut next to them. So she was calling them coconuts, which means that you're brown on the outside, white on the inside. And she was charged with a hate crime. She was charged with a hate crime. I don't know if you saw that, Z. For calling
I saw that. And here's the thing. Can she even litigate that? So it's the point where you can't litigate it. So unless you have a certain view, in this country they call them Oreos, right? Black on the outside, white in the middle. Or bananas for Asians, right? Yellow on the outside, white in the middle. So they have that term. And it's usually an intergroup term. Most people outside of that group doesn't know what that means. Caitlin's raising her eyes and saying, really? Is that what that?
No, I knew Oreo for sure.
You didn't know about banana?
No.
You didn't know about
coconuts
coconut.
new. Yeah.
So, yeah, there are terms.
Yeah, Caitlin doesn't eat that healthy. She probably knows Twinkie. Twinkie's another one.
Yeah. So you're indoctrinated into colonial culture to the detriment of your own group. That's what it means. How is that a hate crime? Isn't it up to that person to decide how they view another person? So it's a hate crime if you have a different view, but you can still have the classic racist hatred. That's still okay. You're not going to go to court for that. You're not going to be jailed for that. You're not going to be called to the carpet for that. You can be a classical hater, but you can't be a specific hater. How about that? You see it, right? Is that just, it's insane. And so that's why, again, we opt out. We got to opt out of this because it's not good for our mental health. As I mentioned at the mall, these zombified kids are a result of the maddening of society. And you have these figureheads that are investing a lot in the media. They're canceling, they want to shut down TikTok, right? And all they have to say is Chinese. Like we talked about it before. All you have to say, the Chinese, people don't really discuss. There's no benefit or interest the Chinese have in destroying or coming to America to do stuff. Okay? Nobody's really after America. But you have to keep that going to keep that. That's how you keep nationalism going. That's what people call patriotism. We're guarding our nation. America has military bases all over the world. Very few countries have that many military under the guise that people will attack. But we need to spread democracy and save the children, except kids we don't like, usually some kind of brown kids, right? It's okay to work in the mines. It's okay to get bombed by all kind of stuff. But God forbid you would come here and seek an escape or a peaceful life, right? There's a reason people in droves and caravans are trying to climb over the border, not to wave flags. They're trying to work because wherever they were, America was there, destroyed their ability to function and work. And because I say that doesn't mean I hate the country. I can just point things out. I can point things to myself. Hey, I can stand and do a couple of more sit-ups. I can do whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with critique. That doesn't mean you hate anybody. Actually, one of the most loving things you could do within your own circle is give critique to the people you care and love.
That's a really interesting point. And we don't think about that often. If I'm going to criticize someone or give them some feedback, I would never do that for someone I don't care about because there's too much of a liability. I'm just going to get into an argument. They're going to take it personally. It's a big cost to me with very little personal benefit to me. The only benefit is if I've got a vested interest in them doing better. If I want to see you do better, then I'm willing to take that risk, to take my time, take my energy, deal with the chance that there's going to be some blowback and some discomfort to try and guide you in a better direction. But when it comes to this country, when it comes to patriotism, we don't talk about any of that. Like, why would... Yeah, I mean, if we didn't care about this place, if we didn't care about being here and what it's turning into, why would we go through that effort and put ourselves out there?
That's such a good point. I mean, look at the mess they call politics today. No one is trustworthy. No one is worthy of governing the country. The candidates are worse and worse, bad and worse, right? And you're debating that, and there's no room even to debate because it's so binary. Wouldn't the most patriotic thing to do was just do a restart? That would be one of the most patriotic things to say, none of the above. Find someone amongst the masses that has the best interests of the people at heart. Stop with these international wars. The economy is bad for the average working person. It's not good. People are busting their ass and in debt. I don't know what percentage of Americans can only make it through one pay period. Most Americans only make it through one pay period. And it's a consumer-driven society. They have no choices. And they're arguing over which party is better than the other. And all of these politicians are sleeping together. Wouldn't want a very patriotic thing to do if you're a so-called patriot is the idea of less government intrusion, holding these people accountable. They're breaking every law and every rule every day in their own careers and their own business. But they hold the average person, the lowly worker, to such high standards that each person is a few feet away from criminal activity, just surviving. Just surviving. So I think when people say, oh, you're talking bad about America. No, my track coach and my martial arts coach talked bad about me until I got really good. I needed to hear what he had to say. And that's what. Yeah,
and then the flip side of this is if you look at people, I mean, think about a child that you're trying to give some advice to or a young adult, and they're just bristling at the advice and they're saying, no, you know what? I'm perfect. I'm going to do things my way. I have nothing to learn from you. I'm great. And then you look at their actual behavior, you look at those objective statistics, and they can't function. They're mediocre. They can't jump as high or run as fast or fight as well. You would look at that and say, why would I want to be that? That's just immature. It's a very self-limiting view. It's a delusional perspective. But somehow collectively as a country, we're comfortable with that. We're comfortable being delusional because it makes us feel better, even though everything is falling apart around us.
It just becomes this kind of rugged individualism. As long as I feel good, it's okay. But our feeling good or individual feeling good or whatever is connected to other events in society. Right? It's like being held accountable for your behavior. Should you let the drunk driver kill everybody or should they be penalized? Yeah, unless it's my friend who's a drunk, or if it's a rich person who's a drunk, or a celebrity who's a drunk. Should we punish pedophiles? Yeah, unless they're my priest. This is how crazy it gets. Should I be proud of my nation? You should be as ashamed and as proud of your nation equally so you can make it a better nation. Just like with your health. You got to get in the mirror and critique your health. You got to look at the labs and critique your health so you can get better. You don't want somebody to kind of glam over it and just say, oh, okay, forget these blood markers. They're okay. You're in the highest percentile. You're exceptional. No, you're going to die. But if you do this, you'll live. And so when it comes to opinions, we're seeing in the worst way this idea that we cannot understand the source of our opinions. If somebody sends me an article about how bad something that, let's say we're looking at this Gaza Hamas stuff, they should look how bad Hamas is. And I say, oh, yeah, that's bad. Then I'll show them a picture of the IDF doing the same thing, and they say, no, there's a reason for that. There's a reason they did. There's a reason they beheaded the children. These other group didn't have a reason to behead these children. And it just blows you away. It blows you away. So I always say, go inward and look at your own affiliations. We're going to get out of here in a minute. Caitlin has to go. You can go. I can turn it off, Caitlin. Just show me how to turn it off.
I'd have to put it back upstairs.
Okay,
it's a thing.
Okay, Caitlin has to go. So we're going to wrap this up. But anyway, the best way for us to kind of heal ourselves, work on ourselves, opt out of this madness, is to have the agency, the awareness, the realization of ourselves. And then in that moment of sharing ourselves, we understand what we're sharing. We're understanding the nuances of who we are, where we come from, and where we're headed. And know that somebody can have a different opinion, extremely different opinion than you. That doesn't mean they're your enemy. That doesn't mean you have to hate them. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy some aspect of that interaction. Or you can simply not tread on them and they don't tread on you. But don't go after people because of their opinions. Let them reveal themselves to you, and then you know who you're facing. Would you rather know or not know who you're dealing with? You follow me?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, this whole opinion thing, it's weird. If you don't agree with someone's opinion, sometimes they'll say, oh, you don't understand me, or you're not listening to me. You're not listening to what I'm saying. No, I listen to you. I just don't agree with you. I don't think it makes any sense. So,
yeah, no matter what you do, I want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, no matter what you do, I won't agree with you because you want me to agree with you.
Yeah.
I've had different life experiences than you. Can you accept that?
Yeah, accept that, and then be able to know what's an opinion. To me, the simplest place to start is to understand, as you're saying, Z, what the objective weights and measures are versus what the opinion is. Because I think too often we combine the two, and we assume that opinions are reality. So if we start with that separation, then we can do the work, go into ourselves, recognize where we're coming from versus someone else. Those are my closing thoughts.
That's it. Let's do it again, man. We got a lot to make up on. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Participate.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on Podbean, iTunes, or your favorite podcasting app. Each 5-star review helps us bring you more unique and insightful content. Learn more at dharmamedia.com. Peace.